Hello, my name is Bridget Goodman. I am Associate Professor of Multilingual Education and Director of the MA in Multilingual Education here at Nazarbayev University Graduate School of Education in Astana, Kazakhstan. I arrived at NU in August 2014. I did my dissertation research in Ukraine at a university that was starting to teach subjects in English, and I was looking at the relationship among Ukrainian, Russian, and English languages in that context. So I knew from my experience in Ukraine that Kazakhstan was asking similar questions about the relationship among Kazakh, Russian, and English languages. And so that's what drew me to come work in this part of the world. It was a continuation of work that I'd been doing in a similar context. What has kept me here is realizing how different Kazakhstan is from Ukraine, how many opportunities there are to learn about not only Kazakh, Russian, and English, but other languages in the Kazakh context. But I also have to say the number one factor that has kept me here for 10 years are the students in our MA in Multilingual Education program. They are the most engaged, the most energetic, the most open to multilingualism and open to ways of learning and thinking and talking about multilingual education that I have ever met and probably ever will meet in my lifetime. And I say that, strictly from the heart. So my main research area identify as the policy and practice of English medium education. That means teaching subjects in English in a context where English is not widely spoken, and as I discussed recently, in a context where not only students but also staff are expected to engage with the English language. And within that policy and practice, I also consider questions of academic writing in English and Kazakh and Russian. I consider questions of translanguaging practices, of the use of multiple languages in EMI classrooms for meaning making and communication and identity formation. And I consider questions of the applicability or transfer of skills and content and communication capacities learned and developed in English to the workplace, where the workplace may be English but also may be predominantly Kazakh or Russian or Kazakh and Russian. But as I said, translanguaging is a theory and a practice and also a belief system. So translanguaging is the use of multiple languages, including mixed forms of languages, what sometimes gets called here as Shala Kazakh, for communication, for meaning making, for identity. And to me, the importance of translanguaging is that it happens very naturally in and out of classrooms, and yet many educators and policymakers frown on translanguaging and insist that classes should be taught using only one language. And they don't realize when they're doing that although they think they're helping students learn the language, they're actually limiting their use of all of their available resources for teaching and learning. And they're also denying some part of their humanity, some part of their lichnost, when they deny translanguaging in and out of the classroom. So I feel a big part of my work here, drawing on literature across contexts, is to encourage the use. At the same time, there are times when translanguaging is not desired. There are times when students, for example, have high proficiency in English for communication and want to work in that language. And so overuse of translanguaging also may lead to less learning or development in target languages. So the key is to understand, students understand who they are, what they have, what their needs are, and to use language and languages as flexibly as possible for maximum psychological and educational benefit. Eric Bolsen-Tastenbeck and I have a whole paper that tries to distinguish code switching from translanguaging and to argue for a shift to a translanguaging lens. Eric Bolsen-Tastenbeck is a graduate of our MA program. He finished in 2019. He's currently finishing his PhD at the University of British Columbia in Canada. So code switching simply means alternating between languages, either from sentence to sentence or between sentences or even within words. And again, for me, the key difference and what I understood through working with Sarek on this topic, the key difference is that code switching sees languages as separate. The only way you can alternate between languages is if they are separate in the brain. The translanguaging lens says that languages are part of a single system in the mind. Когда я говорю с вами, я не конкретно подумаю, я говорю на русском, я говорю на английском, я говорю казахша. I'm just saying what I'm thinking at the moment. People who are highly proficient in multilingualism are not thinking about which language they're using all the time. They're just thinking. And sometimes the thinking will come out in one language, sometimes in another, sometimes in a combination, if their audience understands that. Or if they're trying to draw one word in one language and another language comes out, because it's all in one place in the brain. It's all part of one meaning-making system. And so when we recognize that, and again, this answers your question about policymakers, when we recognize that, then we don't punish children for mixing languages. We acknowledge that they're doing that because this is part of who they are. And if they're doing it because they don't know a word in another language, then we can use that as a moment to teach them the word in another language. If they're mixing grammar forms from one language or another in a way that other people might not understand, we can recognize that and say, you're using Russian grammar or Kazakh grammar rules here. Here's how it's communicated in English. So it doesn't mean we deny achievement or deny boundaries among languages, but the boundaries between languages are social and political. That's not what's happening in the brain. So again, if we understand where students are at, mentally and cognitively, and understand that it's part of their brain activity, then we stop punishing them for things that are not completely yet in their control. And we use that as a basis for further explicit teaching and learning of the differences among languages so that they can start to make conscious choices that then become automatic. But they can also have the opportunity to be playful and creative. So I was trying to explain to students, and it's easier in writing than in speaking, but I once saw a very humorous English-Russian vocabulary list. And the English sentence was, I have been there, where B is B-E-E-N, and it, буквально это я была там. Я уже была там. But in Russian, it was written, я там был фасол. So they took the word B-E-E-N in English, bin, and made it sound like bean, B-E-A-N, with the Russian translation. But unless you understand both languages, it's not funny. I think what I like most is that you never know what you're going to find. Again, I've been doing research in Kazakhstan for 10 years. I've been doing research in this part of the world for longer than that. But to me, there are always unexpected findings and cultural nuances to the questions I'm asking in Kazakhstan. And because Kazakhstan is so rich in multilingual language and history and culture and education, there are always new questions to ask. There's enough topics for research on multilingualism in Kazakhstan to last multiple lifetimes, multiple generations. So that's what's exciting about doing research here. Well, my most recent project, and the paper is still under review, but we just did a project teaching teacher educators about action research. And I was very surprised that not only are they excited about doing action research in the future, but they saw the cycle of action research as a general scientific methodology, not only for helping their students to conduct classes in the future, but as a general scientific method that can be applied to any type of science, hard science as well as social science. That for me was very interesting and very surprising, and seemed very specific to the Kazakhstani teacher educator, or at least to STEM teacher educator cultural community. The main course I teach, and I've been teaching it every year since I arrived here, is Foundations of Multilingual Education. It's a first semester course for first year MA students, and it covers the main theories of multilingualism, including translanguaging and code switching, and also models of trilingual and bilingual education. With as much connection to Kazakhstan as possible, but also connection to international contexts. I also have in the past taught CLIL, Content Language Integrated Learning, and Language and Literacy Development, and I supervise master's and PhD students. It's a very difficult question to answer. I guess what I can say is that when I'm a supervisor of a master's student or a PhD student, I am at my heart a Vygotskian and a little bit of a social worker. So my mantra is start where the student is and try and move them step by step to the standards that we expect. But also understand some students will exceed my expectations and some students will struggle to meet my expectations even halfway. But to expect them immediately to reach the highest standard is not fair if that's not where they're at. And for some students, just struggling and finishing is already a victory. So understanding where students are at and giving them both emotional support, but also concrete, practical feedback, even if it's sometimes critical, in order to meet minimal expectations. The combination of the two is necessary. I sometimes feel like an episode of a TV show where someone's family member pushed them out of the boat into the water and then pulled them back out. So when I'm giving critical feedback, I'm pushing students into the water and then with emotional support pulling them back out so that they can keep moving the boat forward across the finish line. But equally important is how each student responds to that critique and support. Some thrive on it and persist. Occasionally you have students who completely withdraw. But eventually, usually everyone gets across the finish line. But I wrote a paper about being an academic mama. But what I explain in that paper is I think it started with the first cohort of MA students who I spent 2 years with and came to know and love as if they were my own children. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think what happened is there was a student who graduated and I met her parents. And I think I said in Russian, "Я ее академическая мама." Apparently, another student told me in German they have the same concept, Dr. Mutter. And that student to this day calls me Dr. Mutti, which is another variation. So somehow I called myself that, but other students came to accept it and circulate it as my position. Because again, whether I'm giving support or critical feedback, it's all done from a place of love. It's all done from a place of trying to help students move forward. And in the paper, I connect that to a concept in Latino culture called cariño, which is both deep affection and deep respect for members of your family. And cariño pedagogies are approaches to teaching that draw on both deep affection and deep respect and awareness of students' needs to help students who otherwise don't feel like they belong in education to progress in their studies. I mean, our students from Kazakhstan, even with all of their knowledge of English, even with all of their knowledge of multilingualism, may not feel like they belong in the same room with Nancy Hornberger or Jim McKinley. So being an academic mama says, you're family. You're related, to Nancy Hornberger. She's your academic grandmother.